What's up, Kyle? How's it going?
Jeff, how we doing, man?
I'm doing great. So today I'm joined by Kyle Himmelwright. He's the VP of Strategy and Operations at Luster. We've also been friends and peers for a very long time now. I think the first time I met you was on a panel with Rosalind Santa Elena
Yep.
with Pavilion many years ago.
Yep.
So what have you been up to since? Where are you at these days?
Um, Thanks for having me on. Good to see you as always. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've been involved with a startup called Luster now. I've been full time for a couple of months. I was in an advisor capacity before that. But Luster is predictive enablement software startup. So we are as a predictive enablement AI tool, and it's been a fun journey. Really, what we're focusing on is sort of how do we, sort of um, diagnose, predict, prescribe, and then predict, and then prescribe before revenue, causing mistakes take place. And to expand on that a little bit, our co-founders are Christina Brady and Jody Mesa. Christina is a 20-year sales exec, go-to-market exec. She was early at Groupon, early at Glassdoor, and has been at a number of places. And then Jody is our CPTO. She's has a really, really illustrious sort of tech and product career. She most her biggest role was at Ibotta, and she really scaled the engineering team up there, and has had exec roles at Speckit, a couple other spots. So really, just taking kind of the this idea of what practice is as it pertains to go to market, and kind of turning it on its head. And so, like, our sort of underlying thesis is like there's a lot of tools out there, right? That you can do role plays, you can do all these different things, but I think really what it boils down to is like, do you actually know what the problem is, right? Are you actually solving the problem at hand? And so, like, if you have a point solution, or like a role play thing, it's no different than if you and I doing a role play. If we're not practicing the right thing, if we don't actually know what's going on there, you're just throwing darts. And so we have sort of like, I view our the predictive enablement model in kind of three buckets. We have, the idea of sort of diagnosing, so like doing a front end diagnostic of your selling org, so being able to understand in a data centric way, what good looks like, and then who on your team is good. If you're hiring, what are we looking for? How do people perform? And then sort of looking at your out forecast and saying, okay, here's what you have coming up. You have this type of meeting, you have this type of event going on. This is something that you may have, is these skill sets where you might struggle in that meeting. And so here's some stuff you can do to practice before that happens, right? So traditionally, it's always been like after the fact. You go on a call with them with a prospect, and you're like, well, could have done this better, should have done that better. Your manager listens to the gong calls and gives you coaching. But like, in the environment we're in right now, it's never been harder to get in front of buyers, right? It's never been more crowded, more noisy. And so, like, the value there is, how do we not waste live bullets on our prospects, right? Like, how do we wait? We don't want to wait till the damage is done to sort of figure out what we're doing wrong. And so, that's a really, really high surface level description, but it's been great. And so I joined as the VP of Strategy and Operations. My background, as you know, is in revenue operations, and so this was an opportunity for me to continue in that operational role, but also sort of expand, which is something that I've been looking for in my career. Is just sort of getting more involved. So I sit over top of HR, obviously operations, but then also finance and some of the other components of the business. So, ostensibly, I'm, you know, running the business, which has been wildly fulfilling. And it's my first time we're seed stage, so it's been a ton of very, very fun challenges that are a little new to me in my career. So it's been a ton of fun thus far.
So you came from a RevOps background, and that's a pretty wide remit already, right?
Mhm.
So folks come from a frontline selling role, some sort of sales operations role. Going into revenue operations is basically adding a T on top of your I, right?
Mhm.
You're going T-shaped, and here you
Yep.
are taking on other functions like HR, in addition to revenue operations, which is another T-shaped challenge. I'm curious how you think about when you're learning these new elements of your role. Who do you seek out as mentors? How do you learn? What does that trial by fire look like?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I think one of the things we're very, very fortunate to have is, we have a great partnership with our investors. Our lead investor in this round was Phi Alpha, and as a part of their portfolio, we get support through them. So certainly we have some HR resources and finance resources of people that have seen companies at this stage. How have they done it? Where have they spent time? Where have they not? So I think that's that having a really good partnership there and a really good resource there. We have two incredible board members that are always willing to sort of give input. But I think above and beyond that, just talking to a lot of peers, who've seen different things, and done different things. I think the RevOps thing, I'm naturally pretty good at like networking because I'm just curious and I always want to hear, what are you up to? What's this person up to? What's that person up to? So I try to do a decent job of like staying in touch with folks. But certainly when it comes to like an example being, I had to essentially do all of our legal documents from scratch. So, our MSA, our order form, our DPA, and some of those other things. I'm able to draw a little bit on experience, but also just tapping other folks and kind of reach like how have other companies done it? Trying to understand what am I trying to achieve? And in a lot of cases, it's like I'm trying to make something that is useful for us, but also is frictionless, especially at early stage. You're not trying to create something that's going to cause a lot of headaches, especially on the commercial side. So I think just doing a lot of that, just trying to be a sponge with as many people as I can be, and like very fortunate to have a network of colleagues and friends such as yourself that have an immensely deep but also very broad um, base of knowledge and can really tap that, and people are very gracious with that. So that's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of people getting back in touch with folks and kind of explaining the role, and you sort of also feel yourself leveling up as you like first time you talk about it, you're like, you're not in a selling role, but like how do you talk about your new role eloquently, especially to people that don't understand it. And so it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, I would say for me, just being a sponge, reading, connecting and networking, and then honestly, like YouTube a lot, like just whatever, Substacks, things like that. There's so many good resources out there where it's like a lot of times I think at this stage specifically, it's like you're not necessarily looking to do it perfect. You're just not looking to dig an enormous crater for yourself as you scale. So I think like for me, it's like number one, not letting great get in the way of good. And then sort of like making and knowing that like the imperative right now is urgency, right? It's moving with speed, it's moving quickly, it's being nimble and like not trying to get caught up. In some of the things that, typically when I've been at later stage companies, like you're more focused on scalability, you're more focused on process. It's like you got to play that game of I can build something scalable, but I don't maybe don't have to right off the bat. So, kind of balancing that has been a really fun challenge.
So the company itself has just raised a seed round. So
Mhm.
congratulations on
Thank
the
you.
raise. Can you describe a little bit of some of the unique challenges to seed stage companies, and particularly when you're coming in, it's not necessarily scaling, it's about
Right.
some fundamental blocks in place. What are some of those challenges?
Yeah, there's a lot. So I think there's some that are particular to all seed stage startups, and then there are some that are obviously, maybe more so to us. And so um the first thing is our product is basically useful to anybody that has a customer facing team of any capacity. And so like for us, the addressable pool is enormous. And so it's like it's exciting, but it's also, I think one of the things that we've had to be really mindful of is like, okay, where do we want to place our bets? Like, what are the hypotheses that we really feel confident in? And kind of identifying maybe those three areas of like, okay, we believe we can differentiate here. We think we have a really, really good intangible value prop here, and then we've got some real traction with customers, and like we're going to focus on maybe those couple areas, and maybe we have an area, say a vertical or a hypothesis that we want to test, but like trying to really limit the view and kind of stay focused on that is something that for us is particularly, I wouldn't say it's challenging, but it's definitely something we had to be mindful of. I think um for myself, it's also interesting because as an operator, I am keenly aware of all the different tools and all the different things out there you could do. And so on one hand, I'm like, ooh, this is an opportunity. I have a blank slate. I can build things. I can do a lot of experimenting. But I think like for me, I have to be very careful not to distract myself. And in situations where I'm like, oh, this would be a great something to have, but if it's not really moving the needle for me in the next, 6 to 9 months from a business perspective, it's not really all that pressing. And like I think the time horizon is just so much more constrained early stage. You know what I mean? It's just you have to operate with, I wouldn't say more or less urgency. It's just a different type of urgency. And so I think where for me that's one. So figuring out, do I want to use do I want to bootstrap and build something myself? When do I need to hire? Especially in my role, like the remit's a little different. It's broader. And so who do I need to hire? Like what does that persona look like? Do I want to lever, contractors or third or consultants or kind of my network of folks that I know where I can bring people in fractionally, sort of do a thing that I know I need, and then can kind of parachute back out again. So I think balancing that is certainly a huge but very very fun challenge for sure.
So I empathize with one, a horizontal solution that could impact so many different companies and having a large TAM. How do you decide which subsegments to put as a primary focus? Is that a conversation with investors, a conversation with your executive team? Is that listening to the somewhat customers you have today, and seeing if there's patterns? Like how do you go and decide what those top tier accounts you go after look like?
Yeah, so one of the things I would say that we are very fortunate in is that like we're a tool that is, it's a go-to-market tool that's been purpose built by two founders, one of whom is a 20-year exec. So she has literally lived all of the pains. And so not only does she know exactly how and why we've built the tool we have and knows a lot of the nuances and pains that you just wouldn't know unless you've kind of grown up and gone through a lot of the like early career stuff you've gone through. So I think so we have that, but then also she has an enormous network, and so that afforded us the ability to really leverage that network and get our product in front of a lot of people to get a lot of feedback, and then from there being pretty maniacal about um, capturing not all the data, but just the data we need to make decisions. And so understanding, Jody, our other co-founder, is just phenomenal from a product perspective of making sure we're capturing, we're capturing tons of feedback from our customers. We're being really diligent in deals where we are winning or losing. Making sure we're capturing, where do we have, is it a deal that we lost because we didn't execute, or is it something that we didn't have on the roadmap? We've had a couple like really, really large, one or two really large deals where it was like, hey, they're looking for something that is not core to our vision, and like to go and designate the resources we need to win that business would be really distracting to our main mission. And so I think it's a having a good mental model around like when would we, in what case would we deviate from the roadmap against where are we going to say, hey, like that's not necessarily something we would do, and like that's where in other instances where we have big deals in flight and we have something where it's like, oh, this is a little bit out on the roadmap, but we're going to pull it up because it was going to be on the roadmap anyways, right? Like it was something we were going to do, and now there's just more incentive to do it quicker because we have a large deal pinned behind it. So I think that was the case. Jody also is just unbelievably good at doing market research in terms of talking to focus groups and things like that. And then honestly, the thing I think we were really um, Christina and Jody were really good about early on was like not being so sort of locked into, we started as this, we started as kind of like a role play tool, and that was a bit of a wedge in. And as we kind of thought about the business and thought like, what of this can we actually protect? What of this is defensible? Where is our moat? Like, what is the value? What is our value prop? It kind of evolved and evolved, and now we've evolved into this platform that like I think is so wildly different than like just a role play solution. But that was only possible because Christina and Jody were sort of willing to say, all right, let's not have all of this arrogance and like believe like you can have a great idea, but like you also have to iterate on it. And you have to understand what are people going to pay for, like what are the things that people are going to perk up about. So I think that the combination of those three things have been really good. And then the other thing I kind of laugh. So Jody and I are sort of kindred spirits in this way. We were both pretty maniacal about OKR planning and like doing it in the right way and in a way that is like it is defined at sort of the company and like leadership level, but then it leaves flexibility beneath that. Like not we don't really get super uh hung up on like making sure every single person has like 10 OKRs, you know what I mean? But like we make sure that the OKRs we do have as a company are very aligned to our vision, are very aligned to what we think is going to move the needle forward. And then allowing people the kind of flexibility to know, hey, like this is our guidepost and the work you're doing, if you can't ask yourself, am I moving the needle on one of these? You should be prioritizing elsewhere. So I think we've done a really good job of like prioritizing our focus and really staying on that.
Now, at a C stage company, you're not
Mhm.
necessarily building a robust team, but you do need to build a lot of fundamental building blocks. I think today with AI as an option for in
Yeah.
many areas, how are you thinking about bringing in AI into the company?
It's God, it's such an awesome question. It's such and it's one of those things where I think you have to understand like obviously your motion and kind of the things that are part and parcel to running the business. But for me, I think about where I have hypotheses of like where I can really, get and be lean and leverage technology. And then other places where, I don't necessarily know if the juice is worth the squeeze. And so like I think there has been obviously like Clay being an example, some of the top of funnel um tooling, I think is is fantastic. And I can stand up a much more robust and complex like top of funnel infrastructure and so like that's an area where I've kind of leaned in. It's also an area that is interesting because as I've gotten more senior as an operator, it's the part of RevOps that I've gotten a little bit more away from. And so there's been like this dichotomy of like, I know what these tools do, but I also have not had my hands on keyboard like and built things really really sophisticated, and so there's been a little bit of like re-education from that. But um like thinking about top of funnel like signaling, like signal gathering and intent data, those are always things areas I think where like the ability of AI has unlocked a lot of just more robust ingestion, and you can kind of do things that are a little more creative. So I think a lot about I can really juice the top of funnel. And I think how we've tried to do that is like in testing into very specific verticals. So like if we have a couple customers, we have a good use case. Okay, I'm going to use that vertical because I now have like a good use case and a good measure of return. And now I'm going to and then I'm going to kind of test into like, can I extrapolate that into a more of a cold outreach, right? Because a lot of the stuff we have, that's all great. We have great use case, we have a great thing, but it was also because Christina was able to sell into someone she knows or has a good relationship or is known, whatever the case is. But like so it's like how do we make it repeatable? And so for me it's like if you kind of nail that and you sort of look at, okay, what's the repeatability, now I can just start scaling this thing out and almost like taking a verticalized approach earlier, even though that seems sometimes counterintuitive as a startup. You kind of trying to just be opportunistic, but um having some like some discipline in that way has been really helpful. And I think like also it's like the best way to say this would be like understand what works, right? Like not every company has a CEO who has a huge network and a huge following. And like Christina had a hugely successful podcast. So like it would be silly not to leverage her brand and her persona, right, as part of Luster. And like it's one of the things we've had to, work through is like obviously Luster is the brainchild of Christina and Jody, and we want Luster to stand alone, but also like net leveraging in early days, like leveraging founder is such a huge leg up. And so we've been really good about leveraging that. I should say the last thing too is like just being mindful of where we spend time. So like, what things are going to bring us value and trying to be like diligent around what events we go to, like what is actually gonna net a return and what's just going to be cool to post on LinkedIn or it's going to be like a little bit of a vanity thing. While those certainly serve a purpose, we try to be like mindful about that. So I think coming back to the original question, like I'm thinking about leveraging technology, especially specifically AI in a lot of the top of funnel kind of outreach, also in like areas that I think traditionally are content creation. Like how are we equipping sellers to be more ready to go to market? I think it that there is always a little bit of a chicken and egg story where it's like, you have to have brand people, you have to have enablement folks, you have to have all these pieces in place for like to generate the content for sales folks. I think some of that is a little bit easier now where you can sort of feed a prompt, you can kind of tweak it and tweak it and tweak it, but like you can get much quicker to um, an end state product in a much more reasonable and much cheaper way. So I think those are the biggest areas for me. Top of funnel for sure is the area that I think about most right now.
Amazing. Kyle, one last question for you. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences in widening your remit beyond just revenue
Yep.
operations. But what's one piece of advice that you would leave for the go-to-market community?
Um, I think for me it's like I don't want to be too cliche, but I mean I will always bang this drum is like continue to cultivate your network and the folks that are kind of available to you, catching up with peers and kind of comparing and contrasting. The other thing for me is that it's been interesting is like I said, I kind of alluded to Clay, but there's never been more like kind of content out there that you can learn on your own and do a lot. I think in a very cost effective way. I know you build a lot and kind of tinker a lot, and so I think there is still such value in just like learning and like, oh, like this is how these tools work, and getting at least a directional idea of like what you want to build and how you want to do it. But I think staying patient. And I think the last thing, it's funny. I've talked to a bunch of peers and things like that. And I think there's also this like a little bit of head scratching of like, am I falling behind as an operator? Like I don't like there's this existential threat of like, how do I stay on top of all of these things? And I think like the reality is kind of know, pick what you like and pick what you know and obviously try and learn new things. But I try to just like run my race a little bit and kind of know what I'm looking for. Like when I was looking for roles, like what am I looking for in a role? Like and kind of staying true to that. I think that's something for me is like, you know, take time to reflect on kind of where you are and where you're going. And I think like understanding what's going to really bring fulfillment because, like I said, especially RevOps, but it's such a malleable sort of role, and you could do so many different things with it. And so, for me, I think that's the biggest thing is just like just constantly be thinking about like what does your roadmap look like? Where are you trying to get to? Yeah, and then for me, I've just been intensely successful with collaboration, and I've been intensely lucky to have a lot of people in my network who've been very gracious in terms of being thought partners and offering up, hey, templates, or here's how I did this, or here's how I did that. So like, just I'm immensely grateful for all of that, and I try to pay that forward as much as possible. But I think leveraging your network is always something for me that's incredibly important.
Well, Kyle, for those who want to learn more about you and Luster, where would you point them to?
Yeah, LinkedIn is always best. I'm very active, at least from a responding. I don't post a ton, but I'm trying to get better at that. But yeah, LinkedIn's the best way to find me, and look forward to connecting with folks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kyle.